I came to Antioch in '59. My parents were communists, and they were very active, and I was very active in high school, part of the peace movement then, which was the anti-nuclear nuclear testing movement. And so I do remember that at the time there were movements going on. There were civil rights movements, as were described here. There was a peace movement at the time. When I got to Antioch, I chose well, I guess it was a couple years after I got here, I chose to take a co-op job with Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee down in Georgia, where we did voter registration. For me, it changed my life. I wasn't there very long. I had some legal issues, but really the experience changed my life. I had never been so immersed living in and working in a culture that was different from mine for something that was key, which was voter registration at the time. Coming back to Antioch, I see and everybody should take a look at this slideshow up there. There was a large demonstration in '63 that I think was alluded to here. And then there was the action in '64, which I was involved in. And I do want to say that one of the things that I think was characteristic of SNCC and was also characteristic of ACRE here, as Prexy mentioned, ACRE broke away from the NAACP. SNCC broke away from the NAACP, and they were both student movements, idealist student movements with various, in the case of SNCC it was Ella Baker, in the case of Baker I don't know who it was, but idealistic students wanting to move beyond the grown-up organizations that were a little more maybe conservative, as they thought. So in the 60s, in 63 and 64, as was mentioned here, there were lots of meetings, there was demonstrations, there were picketing, there were sit-ins, and also there was disagreements, as Prexy alluded to. There were disagreements within the movement, the civil rights movement, as to how to proceed. I wasn't here in '63. I was very, very happy to view the demonstrations in '63 because they were quite large. When I came back to campus in '64, that's when, in the spring, the action that resulted in 109 people being arrested, that action was being planned. And I had come from the civil rights presence in Georgia, and the SNCC Freedom Singers, I don't know if people were familiar with them, but that was a group of local folks, actually out of Albany, Georgia, which is where I was doing my work there, that were singers. They weren't really singers, but they became singers. They became a professional. They became the music group of SNCC, of the civil rights movement. And while the personnel changed quite a lot over the years of the Freedom Singers, that tradition continued on, and no matter who was in it, they were doing the similar songs with the same verve for freedom and excitement and positive looking forward for many years. They continued that music, and I have to say that just as a side note, the absence of music in many movements today is something that I really miss. I don't understand why. I mean, I don't, but all the movements up until pretty recently had some music component to them. So Freedom Singers was here in March of '64 doing a concert, and I remember they kind of riled us up for this demonstration downtown. The day before we were to go, March 14th I guess it was, that we were to go have this demonstration downtown, there was an injunction. An injunction which said that I think no more than 3 people could gather downtown, or whatever it was anyway. So our committee, ACRE, debated that. And during the time, I don't remember this, but I saw it in the archives, several of the leaders of ACRE left, quit. because they didn't agree with the direction that was being discussed, which was that we were going to, I guess we were going to break the injunction. I assume that was the decision because we did break the injunction. But anyhow, we went downtown. We sat in the middle of the street. We linked our arms, and the rest, I think, is history. We have a lot of pictures. Here's that famous picture of the police. I guess it was raining. It was raining, I think. The police walking down with their batons held, and there was a lot of different types of police that were brought in from different jurisdictions. And I guess someone mentioned the other night that they had to reopen 68 since it was a state road, so they needed to get us off. So they pulled us away and separated us and took us in the cars and took us to jail in Xenia. And the women, I guess, were separated in a different jail. What I was very excited about was that this was the first time, the first time that actually the Antioch students and the Wilberforce and Central State students were working together. We worked together in this demonstration. When we got down there, we were together also. My father, who was a lawyer at the time, he gave us some legal advice at the time and also came in to represent us in the court. I think eventually, I don't know, a few years ago, we were trying to figure out what finally happened with this case, and I don't know if we know what really, because most of the people are dead and they couldn't find the record. Anyway, nothing ever happened. The day after, and the weeks after the arrests, I think we got out the very next day or within 2 days, there were demonstrations in Xenia. There were large demonstrations. I read in one of the reports there was a demonstration of 1,000 people walking peacefully and quietly around in Xenia afterwards. The next day. And I have to say that I was surprised to learn, to be reminded. Oh, and they had gas and hoses, I forgot to mention. Yeah, they hosed us down and they gassed us and so forth. I was surprised to learn that J.D. Dawson, who was Dean of Students, told students if we participated in one of those demonstrations, we were going to get suspended. And I have to say, getting back to my original observation about students splitting off and going on and doing what we needed to do without the grown-ups kind of being in the background there, I learned that as active and vocal and strong the administration of the college was in how we needed to learn and we need to act and we need to work towards equality and we need to do all these things, I think civil disobedience was where that stopped. And I remember several different incidents about that, but I think that if we look at history, most major changes have civil disobedience involved in them, and most of the civil disobedience is done by young people. That's a broad generalization, but anyway, it was something that I only just thought about in the last couple of days in thinking about this. So I am glad that we did it. I'm glad the students went ahead and took the position that we had to. Sorry that at a certain point the administration kind of, there were members of the administration. I don't want to say that we didn't have support from the college, because we definitely had support from the college throughout all of this. But I think at the very end, there was civil disobedience was something that could not really be accepted or supported by the administration at large. So that's my piece.
I want to add one small note that Joni has reminded me of, and I think it's very important. And that is that throughout that period that we were involved, I think there was also tremendous support that we felt from the town of Yellow Springs, and particularly from the black community in this town. I remember any number of times, and the Cordell family being here, I remember people coming up to me and saying, we're with you. you know, and that was really important, because the other thing that happened was that there was some very hostile actions that were taken by random people against us around the campus, off and on, people being yelled at, things thrown at them throughout that period of time. I remember riding a young white girl who was maybe 4 or 5 on my bike in the front, and a guy leveling a BB gun at the two of us as we were riding down that street out there near the Glen. So I think that support of the town was just pivotal to the whole situation.
One other thing I just want to add after Jones' comments about the March 14th demonstration, and particularly after Frank's comments. During the period of 4 or 5 years, my family, received a lot of threats. We received threatening telephone calls. It was mainly telephone calls, letters, etc. But I must say the most frightening thing I experienced during that period was the day, March 14th, I was not in town. I was in Richmond, Indiana, participating in a conference on civil rights. As I left that conference and was driving home, I heard in the car that there's a riot in Yellow Springs, Ohio. A riot, you know? And as a result of, the threats I'd received earlier, etc., I must say I was really surprised that I was not arrested in driving from Richmond, Indiana, back to Yellow Springs. Unfortunately, when I got here, things had quieted down. That there had not been a riot. There had been, the only abuse was on the part of the police. But in any case, I found that was probably, looking back, the most frightening thing I experienced during that period.
My name is John Eastman. I'm graduated from Antioch in 1970, and I also grew up in Yellow Springs. And so the spring of 1964, I was if that's the right year, because I get the two things mixed up somewhat, I was a junior in high school and heard about this demonstration that was going on, and so I'm standing on the edge of the whole thing, kind of watching what's going on, seeing the demonstrators being taken away, and then there's more and more people arriving and sort of spontaneously joining a larger demonstration. And at one point, the police, watched the police with their batons pushing people up the street to the corner of Xenia Avenue and Glen Street. And at this point, I climb a tree at the corner so I can see better. And there's a certain point at which the police get them that far and then pull back. And there's a space about as far as from this table to those columns between the line of police and the demonstrators. And one of the names that hasn't yet been mentioned but was very prominent was Horace Champney. And Horace Champney was just about every single day demonstrating in front of Gegner. When there was the injunction of 3, he was always one of the 3. And there was a point in time after this sort of pausing of standoff between the police with their riot gear and batons and this crowd of demonstrators, some of whom, I'm thinking that even Arthur Morgan was in that group. No, he wasn't in that group?
Beulah Champney was.
Beulah Champney, yes. I remember Beulah Champney being there, who couldn't walk well, had crutches that she worked with. But there was a point in time in which Horace Champney got into that space and turned and faced the demonstrators and essentially, I could hear him, this is my memory of it, said, "We've had a really great demonstration, we've made our point, it's time to go home." And because of who he was and how prominent in it and his ongoing stand, literally in one moment, the whole crowd turned and walked away south on Xenia Avenue, leaving the police with their batons totally befuddled. And so that's how that particular one came to an end.